Hey gang, Kevin here, Life22, and we are reviewing today Matthew Perry's Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. Now, it was, I always liked Matthew Perry. I liked him during the early 2000s, the late 90s. Obviously, like I was a kid when Friends came out and stuff like that, but I was a big fan of Friends. I liked him in the whole 9 yards. The whole 10 yards was, okay. When Fools Rush In with Selma Hayek and him. I'm trying to think. There's a few others. So I was a fan of his. I know he passed away recently, and I was listening to a podcaster, and he was talking about how, like, as much as he probably doesn't align with Matthew Perry's like ideology in life, and a lot of different things he mentioned. This was the great and powerful Andrew Clavin, who was talking about this, and he was saying, I couldn't put the book down. And he's like, my wife will tell you, I raved about the book, and it's like, okay, well, if he likes the book, let me listen to it, because I don't try to pick too many like actor bios to listen to, unless I get a recommendation from somebody like, you really need to check out blah blah blah. And actually, I think it was somebody the other day mentioned that like the Henry Winkler one was good, and I think that's on my list. But it might be a while before I get to it. Things like that. But yeah, no, he happened to go on and on about it, and he had just recently passed, and so I was like, I know the missus was shaken up by the fact that Matthew Perry had died, and so I was like, you know what, let me try this one, right? I'll just pepper it in, and it wasn't a bad listen. And Andrew Clavin brought up a lot of good points with his with this, and it's like, he definitely had a struggle. There definitely was a struggle, and then obviously you start the book out, and he goes like, if you're reading this, I'm probably already dead. Like, that's freaky. That's kind of like that's definitely it's definitely a freaky type thing that people, it kind of chills you. You know what I mean? Like, well, he knew it, and if you listen to his book, he opens up with the fact that there's opening credits, there's the dedication, and the prologue, and he kind of talks about his early childhood. But he opens with a story about how he's like in rehab with like gut pain, right? Like, and he's demanding to be rushed to the hospital, and if it wasn't for his friend, this like lesbian woman he lived with, then he would he may have died, his appendix burst or something along those lines. But it's a good book because it gives you some insight into somebody who grew up with a broken childhood, a child of like famous people, right? Like his mom was the Miss Canada or something along those lines. She was like the Miss Ottawa. She was like a beauty pageant like star at like 19, and his dad was like a prominent Canadian actor. And then like they had him, and then a couple years went by, and his dad left, and he went to go live with his grandparents, and his mom was struggling, and it was one of those like, I get it, like it gives you some insight into that, and then all of a sudden to like struggle through Hollywood, and like even just in your teen years, like I remember being a teenager, and like drinking was like a huge thing, and he talks about that, and not being good with women, he couldn't talk to them, and then like he became the funny guy, and funny and comedy used to be his thing, and I can relate to that as well, like just growing up and not having the best social skills and things like that, and then like developing them later on in life, and I think there was a disconnect though, because like I don't know, I just my parents always taught me this like sense of morality and things like that, and like good values, and like he has a good sense, a good compass on like what is right and what is wrong, but like I think Hollywood had corrupted him in the fact of like what he thought was good. So he would like help people get off of drugs, and he talks about that later in the book, and like how he started like a halfway house, and how he did this and that, and then he let people take advantage of him, and like he wasn't trying to, but he definitely had a lot of that going on in his life. And like, I don't know, it's something about that, like that bleeding heart. Like, it's one thing to have sympathy and try to help the community and stuff like that, but also like just let people walk all over you. And it was kind of like, it was like that side of his life was like doomed for failure, while his acting career was very successful. But acting careers, you know what I mean, for most, you know, you have like the elite high actors, you know, the Daniel Day-Lewis's, right, the guys who get into acting and they study roles for years and they're very good at it. And the statistical anomaly of becoming the, you know, the Matthew McConaughey's, the Daniel Day-Lewis's, the Humphrey Bogarts, right? They just, it's a select few, and that's statistically like how it is. But he, you know, but for most people, like the cast and crew of Friends, right? Like during Friends being out, there's a whole bunch of offshoot movies for these people. And there's a whole lot of Hollywood fame going around, but essentially it is like a drawn out firework, right? Like, and you do as much as you can during the explosion period, because who knows how long you're going to twinkle for, right? Like, because that is most people, right? Like, make hay while the sun shines. I'm pretty sure, like, you know, Eddie Murphy did that during his era. Like, he's Eddie Murphy, right? He's still like a popular guy. He gets work, but he's not like he was in, you know, the 80s and 90s, you know what I mean? And like the early 2000s, he was still clinging to it, but it's like, you gotta do it, because as soon as you start falling out of the limelight, you fall out of the limelight. And that's, you know, the exception doesn't prove the rule, right? There are exceptions out there, like Dave Chappelle disappeared and then came back, and he's right back on the scene. But, and I still don't think he's as big now. Like, he's funny, but he's not as big now as he was like in the early 2000s, when like the Chappelle Show was released, and you know, and the climax of all that, you know, that turmoil. But anyways, so just you know, going on a rant, I guess. But you know, it was one of those things, like I could see why, and I'm like, I'm not a psychologist, so it's hard for me to like actually convey the archetype of him. I can see why he had all these things happen to him, but I can see why he had all these bad things happen to him, or relapses and drug abuse and all this stuff, but I can't kind of convey in words why, like, describe his archetype to a T, like a clinical psychologist could be like, oh, well, he does this and that, and that stems from this. But I can see it. I just don't have the verbiage to vocalize it to you. But it's one of those, it's like on the tip of your tongue kind of thing. Like, you can see as you make your way through, because he has all these interludes where he's talking about like a story about, like, he's jumping back and forth. There's a prologue, he's in rehab, and then, like, you know, jump forward 2 years, and, or, you know, I'm still in the hospital bed with this appendix pain, or whatever it is. And he's in the hospital with his appendix pain, and, you know, then he jumps to The View. Like, so chapter 1 is The View, and then he goes to an interlude in New York, and then he goes another generation shot to hell, talks about his generation, you know, interlude, Matman. 3 was baggage, interlude, dead. See what I mean? Like, he just jumps into these interludes. Like, I've been there before is chapter 4, interlude, Zoom. Chapter 5 is No Fourth Wall. He's talking about his acting career. And interlude, Holes. Chapter 6 is Bruce Willis and how he met Bruce and how great Bruce Willis is. And I've heard that. I mean, even Curtis Jackson and 50 Cent, his one of the autobiography I read of him, he references Bruce Willis and how like phenomenal of an actor Bruce Willis is. How he talks real slow, he talks real quiet, so it makes you actually have to lean in and listen to him. Stuff like that. So then he goes. Next interlude is All Heaven Breaking Loose. Chapter 7, The Benefit of Friends. Interlude Pockets. Chapter 8 is Odyssey. Interlude Trauma Camp. Chapter, and that's like a drug rehab type talk about your feelings. And oh no, I'm sorry, it's like a PTSD type of thing. Like they make you talk about your feelings. You're supposed to cry. It's to work about past trauma, which could cause your drug addictions, could cause a bunch of stuff. Chapter 9 is Three's Not Company. 3 ruins everything. He talks about like dating 2 women at the same time. I mean, a lot of his life too is like what you'd expect to see on like an episode of a sitcom, right? So like interlude, Violence in Hollywood, and then chapter 10 is The Big Terrible Thing. So Friends is referencing to his friends in his life as well as the show, and then Lovers in the title is referring to all these women that he slept with, and some of them he really loved, and before they could reject him, he pushed them away. He would break up with them, he would cheat on them, he would just so they couldn't push him away like he felt that his parents did with their relationship, and by splitting up, how that affects the child. And he talks about it, but I don't think he puts as much onus on that as he should. I think that a lot of people in our society need to talk about that. I think they need to be talking about like how, oh, well, you shouldn't just stay together for the kids. Like, no, you definitely should. You definitely should, because like kids should be raised in a 2-parent household. Like, these are like values, and people are going to rip me up and down about that. Like, oh, well, I was a single mom, or I was, the mom died. Like, yeah, the exception does not create the rule. There are valuable lessons you can be learned from the exception, but it does not create the rule, right? The exception is not the rule. So I'm not saying that a single parent can't do it. I'm just saying that there are a lot of underlying problems. If you read that book, The Boy Crisis, with Warren Farrell's The Boy Crisis, like that, it talks about a lot of that stuff, like how fathers, fatherless homes generate, smaller telomeres. The smaller telomeres equal like lower life expectancy, because the telomeres are at the tail end of the DNA strands, and they allow for higher immunity, things like that. So like lab rats are bred over and over and over again, and there's a genetic bring down that gives them longer telomeres. So because they're constantly, generation after generation, they're being tested with different drugs. So because they're constantly being tested, those telomeres are longer, which makes them more resistant. So if you were to go like inject a field mouse versus a lab mouse with the same stuff, they die instantly, versus the other one, which would be like survive, and then you would watch the things, and it's like, well, that's a bad, I think Eric Weinstein points that out. I think it's Eric, or it's his brother. Anyways, he points that out, that like there's a fallacy in how we study rats because of like the telomeres. But we bring this up in this book, or that Warren Farrell brings up in the book, The Boy Crisis, is that like just all these different things, like little girls look up to a father in the home to know what they should see in a man. And I know that Dennis Prager brings that up quite often too. It gives them an example to go by, right? Lead by example. And if you don't have an example to go by, you have to go by like all the like dad leaves, dad dies, whatever, mom goes, starts dating again, he picks a bunch of different she goes and just starts, she's in the dating scene. Well, in the dating scene, you're not picking, somebody to help. Well, you're trying to pick someone to help, raise the kids and be your lifelong partner. But you're also like, if you found the right person on the first date, right? Like, there are going to be a series of like bad choices, bad dads, bad whatever, bad candidates that you're dating. And then you you know, like, unless you're a strong parent, you have to introduce these, unless you're a strong parent, these candidates, eventually one of them is going to be introduced to your child's life. Some of them get introduced immediately. Like, they get met on like the first date, and it's like, we don't even know this guy. We vaguely know this guy. So who is this person, right? And so and that person may be abusive. That person may have a lot of bad character qualities. You know, it's just a ton of different things that, like, so, like, at least in most scenarios, in a better scenario, you know, mom and dad meet, they get together, they make a commitment to one another, and then they start having children, and then that right there shows a good track record that, you know, like, dad's gonna stick around. Dad probably has something worth his salt because he's making a commitment, something that's greater than himself, and that's kind of part of it. So, like, when parents split up, like, because once you make that commitment that's greater than yourself, you also are committing to, once you create life that is greater than yourself, right? That is greater than you. And so the idea that you can just, like, go off and be selfish or whatever, you know, that he can go off and be selfish or whatever, or she can go off and be, you know, infidelis, and like, be selfish, like, your selfishness is taking away from something that you've created that is greater than yourself, which is not just your commitment into a loving relationship, but also what is spawned from there, what is birthed, which is, and physically birthed, is the children. And that, and so, like, to disregard that, like, there's a lot that affects kids that most humans don't understand at all. And that's kind of what we've got, you know, there. And so his parents leave. So to jump back to the book that we're reviewing, his parents leave him, or, you know, separate. And then, like, he talks about at the beginning of the book, he's like, you know, I was a kid, I was an unaccompanied minor on a plane, and how that traumatized him. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of trauma that people drag when they are children, which is a key integral point. Like, you don't want to coddle your kids, but you don't want to traumatize them either. There's a happy medium to be found in raising children where you're tough enough on them, where you don't coddle them, but you're not so tough that you're abusing them. And there's, like, this happy medium. And it's tough. It's tough. It's one of the toughest things you're gonna do is be a parent. But and if you stick to it, and you can handle the toughness, and you can be firm and loving at the same time. That's why because moms are very loving, dads can be, like, overbearing tyrants. You know what I mean? Like, because that's just how the structure is. That's the biological fact of it, right? Like, it's the dominance hierarchy, right? So, like, moms are more loving because it's a less dominant thing, and fathers are more tyrannical, which is a dominant thing. And so you have to, like, not be tyrannical and not be overly loving. You have to meet in the middle, and that's why it takes both of them, both sides of that coin, to make the whole. And that generates a good loving relationship and environment for children to be raised in. And so, with, you know, him being traumatized by having to be unaccompanied on a plane, and being split between two parents on long distances, you know, but he doesn't put as much onus on that, I don't think, and I think that, like, kind of created a faulty foundation to build off of. And instead of addressing it, which you can see, he repeats the same mistakes over and over and over again his whole life, falls back into drugs, falls out of drugs into alcohol, back into drugs, into sobriety, back into alcohol, back into drugs, back into sobriety. Like, it's a chain, and it's a relatively easy pattern to see. And he just does it over and over and over again until actually finally his death. Obviously, they don't talk about the death in the audiobook because this was published before that. But I mean, he drowned in a hot tub or something, and so, like, you would think, like, why do most rock stars and movie stars drown? It's usually because they've been drinking by poolside, right? Like, well, you know, did too many drugs and fell asleep in the hot tub. I don't know what the circumstances regarding his death were, other than, like, he had drowned and it was like a pool or a hot tub or something. But I guess I didn't do that much research into it. I saw a bunch of the dark humor memes, and I'd heard a bunch of the stories, and I'd seen the press release that he had passed. But it's one of those things, you follow this guy's line of, this line of progression on what's going on in his life, the drunken upward, but I'm young and I've got that perseverance to hit the top goal, and then all of a sudden you hit it, and then you're built on a faulty foundation. So like once you hit the peak of the storm, your house starts to weather. You can't handle all of it, right? Like all the money and the fame and everything else. It's like, oh, let's do drugs, let's do this, let's do that, because you have nothing higher to aspire for. And towards the end of the book, he talks about, you know, in in some of the end credits, he's doing dedications, and he's talking about how, you know, he would love to find someone to spend the rest of his life with. He's not going to reject anymore, like turn people away that he loves, in fear of rejection, which, like I said, spawned from his, you know, his parents rejecting their own love for each other, which kind of in turn rejects the love of the child, right? Or, you know, and he talks about how his parents help him out with his drug addiction, but you know what I mean? I think that he was too far gone to be able to, you know, for them to correct something that happened that far in the past. I think he needed a lot more work to that foundation. And I don't. It's hard to help some people. They're just too far. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that they're not worth saving. It's just that it's too hard. It might be near impossible to save some people. And I think it was tragic. And but he talks about the big terrible thing. And that's the other thing too, that you should learn as a child, is that like you have to take responsibility for your actions. And this big terrible thing, right? He talks about God throughout the book, and he'd seen God in his kitchen, and you know, and God always, you know, please God, let me be rich and famous. And that's like little kids like that stuff, right? Like I want to be rich and famous. I want to be powerful. I want to, you know what I mean? Like everybody kind of wants that, but they also realize that that's superficial. Like, I want to get drunk on my birthday. Like, well, that's not, like, you're not going to go down in history talking about like your virtue by your greatest goal was to be drunk on your birthday, right? Like those are hedonic pleasures that are like in the moment. And I think that I don't think he ever got past that like me, want, instant pleasure kind of like. And it didn't help being rich and famous. It just didn't. It exacerbated it. And I think that was a big, terrible thing. But the big, terrible thing was him. Because most of the bad things that happen to you in your life can be solved by you. Most people don't do that. Most people don't accept that. Oh, it must be these people. I'm oppressed because of this. The patriarchy, the hierarchy, the glass ceiling, they come up with things to blame instead of taking onus. Like, maybe I can change myself. I do that all the time. I get yelled at for not being better. And I strive to be better. It's funny because sometimes you get put on because you are becoming better and better and better, you get put on this high pedestal of being better than everybody else around you. And everybody else around you is like falling by the wayside. And it's one of those things. So like it's a double-edged sword with a lot of this stuff, and it's just, but you have to take responsibility for what you are. So this big terrible thing, and he's like, you know, like this, you know, sometimes in some parts of the book he blames like, you know, this is God's punishment, and it's like, no, it's not God's punishment. It's you not making proper choices. The choices that you make every day, as long as you're making the best choice with the information that's provided to you. Like, should I get up early? Should I take a shower? Should I brush my teeth? Like, if you're making the good choice instead of taking the easy choice, which is, I'll do it later. Well, I'll do it later is making the choice to not do it because you know you're not going to do it later. And that's a bad choice. And then your teeth fall out. And then you're like, well, you know, I just have bad teeth. Like, no, you're blaming somebody other than you who had the choice to brush your teeth. That's kind of what's going on. And that's a lot of what's going on. And the big terrible thing is this addiction. And he keeps calling it a disease, like it's something outside of his control. And it's not. I get that we're big bags of like chemistry and biology, and that like you give somebody sugar and like you give a rat sugar in the experiment and the rat goes crazy because the sugar's awesome. But it's not like it's not all that there is. Like it's just we are not the rat in the experiment. We could be if it was just, you know, for metaphor's sake. But you are stronger than the stuff that you ingest. So like, and for you to act weak, and not go to your full potential to be stronger than crap that you ingest and just lay there lethargic because you did a shot of heroin or something and you become one with your couch, like, that's on you, man. That's on you. That's not the heroin's fault. The heroin didn't put itself inside of you. It's not a cartoon with the dancing fruit and be like, oh, just keep eating and just, no. Like, no, it doesn't. It's on you. It's on you as a person. It was on Matthew Perry for his consumption. That was, like, his choices were on him. And, like, I really, truly think that he was an amazing person. He was a good-hearted person. He had great luck and prospect, and he had a good moral compass. He was very bad at decision-making and choosing which direction to go. And choosing what to do. And he made some good choices, but amongst them were many bad choices. And the problem is, it's like in this world, if you make one bad choice, like, it could end you. So, like, you know, like, oh, should I go hiking without a companion and, you know, in the Adirondacks where, like, there might be bear and, yeah, whatever. And the next thing you know, like, you get eaten by a bear. Like, bad choice. Get on this plane. And the bolts are missing. And then, like, the wing comes off and you die. Like, that was an unforeseeable bad choice, but it was still a choice that you made. Like, you died because you got on that plane, right? Like, that was, you know, to take stuff out of your, to create these constructs, to take stuff out of your own control, is denying yourself the truth, which is that most of things happen in life are because of you. Like, the things that happen in your life are because of you. I get that. I do these videos. I see consequences of those all the time. People stop me, people don't like me, people praise me. You know what I mean? And it's like, you get it from all sides. You're not going to please everybody. I speak my opinions, and I choose to do these videos. And those choices are mine. And I live with the consequences. But to say that your drug addiction is not your problem, it shouldn't be other people's problem. I mean, it becomes other people's problems when you're a drug addict and you're robbing people's houses, like, because now, like, it's your problem because you got shot on someone's front doorstep for robbing their house or trying to do harm to other people. But it's also their problem because you're intruding on their rights and their freedoms, and their, like, becomes their problem when you kill somebody in the amongst of your drug addiction trying to rob their house, and then they pull a gun and you turn the gun back on, whatever it happens to be. I could go down a rabbit hole on stories all day about this stuff, but I've done almost a 30-minute review on Matthew Perry's book, but there's a lot to unpack here. There is a lot to unpack here. And it's not just all his little, like, flings and, you know, like, one-night stands and the sex was amazing and blah, blah, blah. And you could tell that, like, the drugs and alcohol had gotten to him because he narrates the book, which is kind of also weird, right? Like, after some, like, I think this is the second time I've done this where after someone's died, I happened to read a book that was, what was it, Carrie Fisher. I read her, like, one of her autobiographies, and she had died, like, 6 months before, but it was in my thing because it was like a free listen or something, and I had it in there, and then I listened to it, and it was just kind of weird because she had passed. And I mean, she went through similar crazy things, like just fame and fortune or power. But a lot of people can't handle power. They're not trained right. The foundation, if it's not just the utmost perfect, it will not weather the storm. And I think that's a good life lesson to take away from any of these Hollywood stories. It's usually like a mishap in their value structure. It's not correct. Hollywood does not breed correct value structures. The incentive structure of Hollywood is money and greed. Money and greed. And there's a reason why there's sins, because they corrode. They corrupt. It is what it is. So, but the big terrible thing in his life, that was the final one in the title. The big terrible thing was addiction, this quote unquote disease, right? Well, but it was his problem, right? And only his decisions can fix it. You can't help someone who's not willing to help themselves. And so, interlude, the smoking section, he talks about how he can't quit smoking and how he did quit smoking and then his teeth fell out, and, like, well, you know what? You made the decision to stop smoking. Your teeth fell out. That was from years of making decisions to smoke. You needed to get past it. And then he couldn't handle the pain from the surgery to get his teeth put back in. So his, And then 11 is Batman. And then the end credits. And so it was overall a good book. I recommend that you listen to it. It's on Audible. It's narrated by him. Let's see here. I'm sure it's also in print. It's not the print is not narrated by him, of course. And the book was released in November 1st of 2022, so about a year before he died. And the total listen time, that's usually what I'm looking for. Oh, it's 8 hours and 49 minutes. So it's not a terribly long read. I mean, we've read longer on the show. So, I mean, the Gulag Archipelagos is broken down into like 3 different volumes, and they're like 80 plus hours for all 3 of them together, like 30 plus hours for the first 2, 30-ish hours for the first 2, and then like 20-something hours for the second one. And then there's like an abridged version, which I'd like to read because it's narrated by his son, or grandson. Anyways, Matthew Perry's book, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, a memoir narrated by Matthew Perry. It was a very, very good listen. Don't lead by example with this one, but take his example and grow from it, learn. Take some of my words, maybe I expounded on something that maybe you didn't think of after you listened to the book, and together we can grow. That's what this portion of the channel is about. So like, there's a lot of portions of this channel that like sometimes, and there's less of this now, is Kevin's drunken rantingness on the channel. Like right now it is like 6:30 in the morning, and I am recording this, and I've been sober since January 6th. Like I'm not drinking this month, so this isn't like a drunken rant, but I do the life theming, I do the book reviews, I do these things to show that how I grow as a person, the trend, the track, everything. I do videos with my kids so that like it strengthens them and it shares something with the community that you guys can grow off of too. So we're here to help. Every so often there's a drunken rant and I might pick somebody to villainize, but we all do it. Nobody's perfect, but so as for next time, we will see you guys. Life22, signing out.